Today I'm going to read another excerpt from my book, Encountering Mother Teresa, about my interview with Monsignor John Esseff. I met him in 2004, not long after the publication of my new book, Come and See, in 2003. I went to speak at a parish in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and a woman in the audience called me a few days later when I was back in Atlanta and said, "You have to meet Monsignor John Esseff. He knew Mother Teresa better than anyone." So I picked up the phone and I called the seminary, not expecting a call back, but Monsignor called me and he had the most gentle, beautiful voice and said, "Why don't you come up to Scranton and why don't we meet in person? And I'd be happy to share with you my stories about Mother Teresa." So once again, I got on a flight on my quest to interview those who knew Mother Teresa best. When I arrived at the seminary where Monsignor was the spiritual director, I was given a room to stay for a couple days, and that first morning I woke up and I looked out at this snowy landscape, and it was so beautiful and peaceful. I went down to the cafeteria and I got my tray and brought it to a table where there was a couple priests already having their breakfast, and then Monsignor entered the cafeteria and he looked at me and he said, "Linda, it's such a pleasure to meet you. You look just like Mary." It was like the first of many, many, many surprise comments that he would make over the next 20 years. I think it's close to 20 years now. And because I was wearing a white sweater and a pair of blue jeans. So once we were seated and having our coffee together, he said, "So Linda, tell me about your time with Mother Teresa." And I said, "Monsignor, I'm here to interview you about your time with Mother Teresa." And he said, "First tell me about your experience." So I began talking to him, and when I looked into his eyes, it was like looking into these pools of love, and I began crying. I mean, there was like tears coming down my face. And the priest next to us said, "Oh, don't worry, this happens all the time with him." And so this began my 2-day visit at the St. Pius Seminary in Dalton, Pennsylvania. And he talked about how he first became acquainted with Mother Teresa through her sisters in Beirut, Lebanon, where they were stationed in the mid-1980s, and he was the pontifical director to the Vatican. Monsignor began giving the sisters day retreats and days of recollection. By this time, the sisters had told Mother Teresa about Monsignor John Esseff. His role as the director of the pontifical mission required that he traveled back and forth to Rome. So Mother inquired through the sisters whether he could lead a retreat in Rome for the junior sisters who were about to make their profession. When Monsignor arrived in Rome, Mother Teresa informed him he would give a talk to the superiors of the order. "You know, Mother, I'm not impressed by the people I read about. So often, they are so disappointing. When I meet them, I'm usually disappointed. It wasn't you I was looking forward to meeting. When I met your sisters, your daughters, I was bowled over because they truly were Christ living in the world. They radiated this love and this joy. I often tell the sisters that the greatest gift Mother Teresa has given to the world is the sisters. It was a community in love with our Lord, and a community in love with the poorest of the poor. It was under the direction and guidance and inspiration of our Lord. When they gave their rule of life, I was so amazed. These sisters would leave home for 10 years and not go back. I never met a group like that. If your father died while you were on mission, well, you pray for him and you would grieve. And that would happen to some of them. A parent would die, but their commitment and their dedication, their holiness, their asceticism, this was a new wave of love. This was a beachhead for God. The war was all around them, but when I went into their convent, the House of Peace, I'd come in from the war, from seeing the suffering and pain, and enter their home, and it was a haven of peace and joy. I asked how the home radiated peace and joy. He said the orphanage was filled with babies who were cast-offs, many of them with deformities. When you saw the sisters in the nursery caring for them, I knew that was Jesus in the baby. They would hold them, love them, and sing to them. That initial meeting with Mother Teresa in Rome became the beginning of a long relationship between Monsignor Esseff and the Missionaries of Charity. Even today, at age 90, he still gives retreats for the sisters. Monsignor said that this was an order without boundaries. I see them as the most authentic group of sisters. They are so powerful. They don't fit some of those categories at all. Remember, I was telling you that to be a disciple of Christ, you must be as gentle as a dove and as cunning as a snake. Mother had both those qualities. She was such a combination. The Holy Father called her the greatest missionary of the 20th century. She was so powerful in her generosity, but also in her wisdom. God bless.